Good afternoon, everybody. It's fantastic to have everybody in the house here. We are surrounded and among dear friends, incredible leaders, mentors, supporters, colleagues. And the one thing we all have in common is the love of children and families and the belief in being part of moving everybody forward. My name is Mosle. I have the big pleasure of serving as a vice president here at the Aspen Institute as a member of the policy team under the leadership of Dan Porterfield, and I think Elliot Gerson, our executive vice president, is here as well, and also as the founding executive director of Ascend at the Aspen Institute. And I have the incredible pleasure of also serving with a fantastic team, the Ascend team at the Aspen Institute, and I really want to give a shout out to Marjorie Sims, Sarah Haight, Hallie Young, Lori, the entire team. You're going to see and hear from different Ascenders throughout the day, both formally and informally. Embrace them and get to know them. We are just delighted to have in the house 28 states represented, from as far as Hawaii, Washington, Arizona, Alabama, Nebraska, Minnesota, Michigan, New England, Mississippi. I would never forget Mississippi's in the house. And then Tennessee, Georgia. But part of that, these are folks who all came in their busy lives with a lot of other places to be because they are part of this network and part of this movement. And so I just want to kick us off with a couple things. One is just to sort of say, kind of why are we here in this moment and why Ascend and why the Aspen Institute? The growth over the past sort of 7-8 years has been sort of exhilarating, humbling, sometimes a little overwhelming. But to take stock of what's been accomplished, what's been learned, where are the innovations, and most importantly, where are we going forward? And I want to also do that through telling a couple stories. A lot of times at Ascend, we're sort of in the business of show, not tell. We work in a way that we work with leaders, diverse leaders out there in the field, and we see the privilege of how to help support, guide, and amplify their work so that we are moving forward together. And then we're going to just talk a little bit about when we look just a couple of the success factors that sort of are lessons as we go throughout the day or that lie behind some of these stories that are shared and really reflect the two-generation approach. And then we're going to get onto some inspiration from our leader, Dan Porterfield, the CEO of the Aspen Institute, who shares this passion for children and families and mobility as our CEO in his intellect and in his heart, and also one of our favorite trustees and partners in all things good, Mike Bezos of the Bezos Family Foundation. And then we'll kick into the program. But for many of you, I think everybody here probably is familiar with Ascend, and some of you might have met us at different places along the journey. But really about 8 years, it came here with the thought of just a very simple idea. What would it look like if we put children, parents, families at the center of research, of practice, of policy, of philanthropy, but just really had that North Star in front of us? And what would it look like to catalyze a new conversation, building on lots of wisdom and great work in the field, but that could be about whole family development, thinking and working through children and the adults in their lives together. And to do this in a modern way, respectful of the past, and absolutely equity-driven. And when we talk about equity, just to be clear, we're talking about economic equity, we're talking about race and ethnicity, we're talking about gender, we're talking about geography. We follow the data, we listen to the voices, and we care about who's at the table. So that's just, if you haven't known us, that's a little bit of who Ascend is. We have been very privileged to be a member and be part of the home here at the Aspen Institute, and that's by no mistake. The Aspen Institute was founded in 1949. I always say this because I think history matters. In 1949, the Institute was created to be a place for diverse leaders to come together in dialogue about what are the most critical issues facing our country. Well, ensuring all of our children and families reach their full potential, there is nothing more important than that, my friends. And I think that is what brings us here together. Another piece that's a little bit different about how we do things at Aspen and Ascend is we embrace the Socratic method. And I share that because the Socratic method, at least in Anne's interpretation, and there are many, but is first always looking inward. Always looking inward. Am I living an examined life? Are my actions reflecting my values? And as we question that out, how are we then, like Socrates did, questioning the institutions, the structures, our priorities, and what is the ethical framework or values that sort of guide the decisions and choices we make? So that's just a little bit about sort of Ascend and the Aspen Institute in case you're in the wrong room. Feel free. What I want to just set us off with for this conversation, and we're going to be doing some really exceptional deep dives. This is one of these moments where we are sharing up innovations and leaders and what's working, and still some problems we got to figure out, but sharing generously and openly, accepting all sorts of other ideas and feedback that will come throughout the next 2 days. So I say that openly. But one of the things when we did our first theory of change, we all love those. We started with a piece of what would it look like to truly shift mindsets and behaviors, because everything else trickles out from there. And so to really be thinking about that 2 generations at one time. Most of you have seen the 5 components, and this I just put out there because these are the core components that constitute the 2-generation approach. And everybody might have a slightly different way, or you might say, I'm in the health and well-being space, or I'm in early learning, and that's exactly right. But these components are when they are working on all cylinders and together are when any of our lives and our families and our children thrive. As a mother making it up every day, I agree. But when we look at this, I just also want to note, and you've seen these before, but all of these core components also reflect fields, big bodies of work. And when we set out here, we very deliberately, we had some wonderful philanthropic partners from the beginning who I'll thank out later, but we didn't want to create an organization because that was the antithesis of the 2-generation approach. We wanted to create a national hub where people could come together across research, practice, community, family, policy, and across these domains to really move families forward. And so when you think about post-secondary employment pathways, translation, we're talking about community colleges. We're talking about workforce centers. We're talking about LIFT. When we talk about early childhood development, we're talking about Head Starts. We're talking about EduCare. We're talking about informal care in homes. So just take that translation as you think about this work. Now, key principles. Like any good body of work, you want to have some principles that guide this work. And like everything we do, we really work in co-design mode. We have a national network, which we'll talk more about tomorrow, as well as a national fellowship program and a Colorado fellowship that has resulted in about 80 absolutely, drop your breath, put down the mic, exceptional leaders that are leading across these different components in their own way towards the North Star of whole family development and putting the 2-gen approach to work. But what we all look at is how do we think about these guiding principles? So the one thing is to always think about is that we are really counting for the outcomes of children and the adults in their lives. Because if you really do that, you can be running the Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families, like my dear friend, Assistant Secretary Lynn Johnson does, and she can sit down and talk to the Department of Labor and say, how are our outcomes going to line up to make a difference? Just like as Lyft might sit next to over in Washington, D.C., how am I going to work with Martha's table and think about how your services and our work can come together and we're going to have shared outcomes? Another piece you'll hear loud and clear, and it'll be highlighted very intentionally in the beginning of this, is about listening to the voices of families. And this is not just listen, this is about authenticity, this is about respect, and this is about power. For us, always getting as close as you can to the problem or the community that you are privileged to be a part of. But if we are not really authentically thinking about parent-powered solutions, we're going to be missing the boat. The other pieces you're going to see kind of highlighted in some of the stories I share, but you know we're all in the business of thinking about evidence and also innovation. If we had all the evidence to solving intergenerational opportunity for everybody, we'd be done. We are building evidence, we are building innovation, and we are doing this through a lens of radical collaboration. So here's the fun part. I wanted to walk through a couple stories. And storytelling and shifting narratives are a really central part of the work that we do. Because as we all know, sort of reaching into our hearts is what will change and crack us open to go forward. And so there's 3 stories I wanted to share, and I'm not going to do any of them enough justice because each in their own right could be their own Aspen Forum on Children and Families. But one is a story about talking about the Los Angeles Valley College Family Resource Center and Amber Angel. Another one is talking about the state of Georgia. And then the third one is about New York City. And so first, I wanted to talk about LA. And the thing about all of these stories, and as the team knows, but I won't do it, behind each of these stories, I literally could tell you 100 other stories happening in other places in the country in almost every single state. So none of these stories are exceptions. They are what we can do when we are doing it well and with a 2-generation approach. So when we think about Los Angeles Valley College in the San Fernando Valley, it's about 20,000 students, 7,100 and a bit more are Pell Grant. More than 60% are really at poverty or just sort of at the very margins economically speaking. It's about 58% Latino, overwhelming first generation, doing some really exceptional work. With Los Angeles Valley College, what they have is one of the sort of gifts of having an on-campus family resource center. And Marnie Roosevelt, who has been our leader in this work, is here somewhere, and you'll get a chance. Hey, Marnie. And Marnie has really done a family resource center and have a welcoming space for students, certainly student parents, of which 30% of the students at Los Angeles Valley College have children and are parenting. And more than 33% have been pregnant during one time while also being a student. So, but having that home where many students say their top concern when they're pursuing post-secondary can be a feeling of isolation. I don't feel quite like everybody else. Meanwhile, the demographics of who the traditional student is like out the window. But providing that space that makes it easier to get connected to supports, early childhood, family development has been a key part of the Family Resource Center. Amber Angel, who is a dear friend, and she's been on the journey with us, and also one of our formal parent advisors. I was just speaking with her yesterday, and I asked her if I could share a little bit of her story. And again, Amber, thank you. I won't capture it all, and there's many other stories I would love to share. But one thing I wanted to talk about Amber is she just graduated with her bachelor's in science and family studies. She's preparing to walk in May. She's getting ready to go to law school. So everybody get supportive. She has 2 daughters, Lennon and Everly. Today's Lennon's birthday. She's turning 10. Marnie is just about soaring. So she came in and she's been a longtime partner with us in this work, as with Marnie. And just she came in a little bit early. So when she was in town, she's not only coming here for this forum, but yesterday she had the chance to meet with Governor Newsom. And they had a chance to talk about how do they accelerate post-secondary success, and Governor Newsom's already tweeting her out. I'm looking forward to that. But it's exciting because that kind of connection happens where there's deeper investments in the early childhood system, but also thinking more deeply about parents' educational, economic, and health success. Amber also happened to have time to go over and visit the Department of Education to their C Campus program. C Campus, for those of you who don't know, is child care access means parents in school. As she went over there, she's already updated our intel. One of the kind of tailwinds we have is thinking about the increased 2-gen federal funding opportunities, of which C Campus has already been tripled, and there's a new RFP coming out. So thanks for taking care of that, Amber. Now, what you might not know about Amber is she has 7 siblings. Amber is the first in her family to step foot on a college campus. She is the first to graduate. When Amber dropped out of high school when she had Lennon. She decided to go back to school when Lennon was just turning 2 because she knew about the Family Resource Center and wanted to get some child development assistance and potential education for herself. You'll hear us talk tomorrow about mutual motivation, when a child and a parent's motivation come together. There's nothing more clear than that than when Amber decided to walk back in. As Amber went into school, she had the experience of all the kind of factors that one might think raising 2 kids, getting back into college, just hadn't been something that had been generations before, and how she navigated a campus that wasn't necessarily ready for her always. And one of the things I kept thinking about when I watched the Oscars, like I'm sure like many of you the other night, was Regina King's beautiful statement when she was being recognized for her phenomenal acting in If Beale Street Could Talk. And she said, "I am what it looks like when love and support is poured into me." And when I think about all of us, when that love and support, which was poured into Amber through the Family Resource Center, through her math professor who saw that she was pumping because she was on class from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night to have stackable classes all in one day so she could still work and be a parent. And he said, "Take my office and go pump there." Or the day her water broke and she had to leave class, and he's like, "You've never left class early. What happened?" She's like, "I had a baby." And she was back. And I share all of this because it's important to tell stories, but as Amber would say, just as much as I would, while she is absolutely an exceptional woman, she again is not the exception. This is about pouring love and support and seeing one another fully and wholly. And so I just I think that's a really, and there's Amber with Governor Newsom. He's never looked so good. The second story I briefly want to just share, and I'm going to not go quite as deep, but I just kind of wanted to take you a little bit into the story of that experience when we rethink post-secondary success for parents. But here's Georgia, and I don't know if Commissioner Jacobs is in the room. I haven't had to. Hello, Commissioner Jacobs, and this is a shout out to you and your team, and also Kristen Bernhardt, your former deputy who's now going off to Ounce, but is also an Ascend Fellow. But Georgia, and this is a story. There's always, story can always start way back here. Go for it. So this is not the full story. But what was the essence of what Georgia decided to do is one of the leading states in thinking of child care and early learning, and one of 3 that had the Department of Early Learning and Child Care in one agency going deep on child care. I think it would be fair to say that probably 5 years ago, thinking about parents was not something on your core radar. They have gone through a complete change in how they think about their work, doing all the work they've done on data systems, trauma-informed training, brain science, build that together. But if they weren't going to connect with parents, they weren't going to be successful in the work they were trying to do. And so the highlights of what they did was a very deliberate partnership with the Georgia Technical College system. And that meant the leaders at the top were connecting, the deputies were connecting, their division departments were connecting to get to know one another's realities, outcomes, norms, language, so that they could figure themselves out, so that they could put children, parents, and caregivers at the center. When we fast forward just this past summer, they've had sort of full-day training sessions with child care, early learning staff coming together with workforce, temporary assistance for family, technical college. They're looking at social capital. How are they bringing parents into the campuses, into paying good jobs, to be navigators, social capital creators, and to bring their voice into the policy system. And so when we think about that work in Georgia and the partnership that's now kind of deeply embedded in their technical colleges, so they are thinking about parents as a priority, they're also changing the cultures of their workforces. And when we think about still, all sorts of other stories, but the work they are doing also mapping where there are need and where there are services and building their equity capacity is part of the continued work forward. The third one I just want to share very briefly is New York City. And again, I know I'm going a little by coast, and I could literally go talk to you about Omaha, I could talk to you about Michigan and other places. But I want to give a special shout out and sort of highlight on New York City to the new Department of Child and Family Wellbeing. And part of this that is so important, and I have to hat tip to both David Hansel, who is a former board member with me for the American Public Human Services Association and sort of the big human services guru up in New York, but then Lorelei Vargas, who has led this work at the division, reimagining child welfare through primary prevention and through trauma-informed education practice on being inelegant. I know we have things with this, brain science and community and equity. What Lorelei has done, just a piece of this, and to make it about children and families, is they have done bringing together an advisory group with the mayor's chief of staff, housing, education, all the critical supports to be part of mapping the strategy. They have gone and looked at where are the communities with the highest need to create a whole new strategy around family enrichment centers. But before they even did anything, rented a building, bought a building, they went to the communities first to say, one, do you want it? Two, how would you like it constructed? How do you want to see this process going? And to have a fundamentally different approach where they gave the power up to the community, which at times wasn't also easy at City Hall, but that was part of the deliberate process. Another part in her work that's been really powerful is she has led an effort to, for training for all of her staff, and as she runs the child care subsidy program, the folks both providing formal and informal care. So those caregiver workers are getting trained on the impact of intergenerational trauma. They're getting trained on brain science. We are thinking about their strength, their development, and their ability to serve. And so sort of cracking that open so it gets really part of the ether. And then the last thing is she's constructed a formal office of equity so that everything they do throughout their procedures, their RFPs, and their culture, they are really being intentional about equity. So those are just 3 examples, and there's so many that are within the work that you're doing that you're going to hear about. And so when you think about just some of the success factors, and we'll have a chance to go deeper tomorrow, these are just some of the critical factors in what makes it a 2-gen success. And non-negotiable, children and families are at the center. How we really think about equity will strengthen our work. It is not always easy, but we follow the data, who's at the table, how and where resources are going, and thinking about power. I do want to think, one of the things, the 2 last things is when we think about cross-system and cross-funding. One of the big challenges, and I suspect this happens to all of you in your lives, you have funding streams, and you want to meet and produce on those deliverable results. But if we're jumping into funding streams versus fundings fueling families, we're always going to be missing it. And so how do we have profound conversations that set up the outcome goals at the onset and really have fidelity to that? We think about one thing, if you just think about social capital in all of your efforts, are you building it or are you breaking it? Are you lifting up or are you breaking down? Because ultimately this is about changing the narrative, because we all know that everybody has the talent and the potential, and we can't make it without everybody fully in. So that's just a little bit about, oh no, now I've really done it. Oh no, Sarah. Oh God, I was doing so well. Oh God, Sarah, well, I've gone way off. Anyhow, Marjorie or Sarah, someone if you can get me to my slide. But I just want to kind of close out, because I want to close out as we think about how the opportunities of how we're going forward is during this conversation, we are going to be going into some of the 3 key themes that have been really important to us. And so as you go from today into tomorrow, I want to encourage you to both learn, share, connect, and prepare for sort of your action step coming out of here. Sort of engage with one another openly and generously. The amount of intellectual power that is in the house is really extraordinary. And we're going to be kicking off with 3 panel sessions that really reflect some of our core values. One is about meeting parents where they dream. And this is something Janine McMahon, who is one of our parent advisors, she pushed us. We're sort of meet parents where they are, authentic listening. She's like, lame. Meet parents where they dream. And how do we sort of raise that bar? And so I think it's very special that we have parent leaders on that panel, and that Assistant Secretary Lynn Johnson, the panel she wanted to be a part of, and not even necessarily plenary, she wanted to be in a discussion with parents. And we have nobody better than to facilitate, and who has done that both in a public leadership post as well as philanthropic, than Raquel Hatter. And the piece I'll just share, when you think as you listen to them and in that panel, one of the real wins we had in this fall was we had, by a conservative estimate, $4.6 billion of increased federal funding that could be 2-gen focused. That's the Child Care Development Block Grant, up to more than $5 million, more than doubled, $610 million more in Head Start and Early Head Start, Child Care Partnerships, McV and home visiting, C Campus, and there are many others, but to be thinking about follow the money so it gets to parents and families' lives as effectively as possible. Just putting that out there. The second one that has been a huge learning is around brain science and the importance of brain science. We've been very lucky to be students with the Bezos Family Foundation and their world that they've helped create with others up at Harvard, and Pat, and Andy, and Sarah, and many others. But as we think about what we've learned around brain science, not only have we learned and has it become really broadly understood the importance of investing early and what happens so dramatically in a child's brain in those early years, we're also learning, because of Dr. Sarah Wattimore and her colleagues at the University of Denver, about what's happening in the brain development of parents at the time of birth. It's a time of both vulnerability and opportunity if handled well. And that neurological change happens to mothers and to fathers. So how do we keep thinking about bringing that together? So I'll have a chance to hear from both Sarah Wattimore and then another wonderful fellow, Matt Beal, who is also working here in the District of Columbia to think about sort of child psychiatry, child and family well-being in an entirely new, exciting and systems development way that's also grounded in community. So that will be a wonderful one, moderated by Marjorie Sims. And then lastly, one of our big learnings, and I don't know if Mira Mani is quite in the house yet. Hey, Mira, and you'll laugh, and everybody who is in and one of the first cohort of Ascend Fellows. One of the big learnings we really pushed, and this was really in 2012 and 2013, this was Mira's vision, was about the intersection of early childhood and health. And that was coming up at the same time that people were really thinking about, in this new way, about the two-generation approach. And when we think about the intersection and the importance of health and well-being and coming together, I think that's a whole new area of work that is happening. And so we're going to be excited to have both leadership from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation with Dr. Rich Besser, and then, of course, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation with Carol Larson. And then we wouldn't be Ascend if we didn't have time to have a little bit of fun with the reception. So as we think about this work, you know, when we set out, as I said earlier, it was really about sort of a simple idea. Simple, straightforward, children, parents, families at the center. And we didn't want to, you know, we sort of thought, is this a field? Is this an approach? And it's absolutely an approach. It's a mindset and a behavior. And we've been excited to be a part of many other fields, like early childhood, helping early childhood leaders to think much more robustly about parent educational, economic, and health success. But we've also, and how we thought about post-secondary, which just is waking up to really a new conversation around parents. And then as we also think about health and well-being, hospitals are thinking and acting in new ways. We've just seen so many different actors and partners coming together in this work. And again, it's really about the centrality of children and families. And so while we have influenced many movements, I do think in some ways the two-generation approach has become its own kind of movement. And I think part of that is because it's about unifying and amplifying the diverse, phenomenal leadership that is happening out there in the country that is solution-driven. Because we can make a difference, we can move the needle, we are building public and political will. And just one little note that we were looking at last night, and I'm gonna move over to Dan Porterfield in 1 second, but we just realized that between 2014 and 2018, we've had a 5% increase in public support in two-generation programs. Parents that serve children and parents together. Parents and the adults in their lives. And we don't have a big fancy ad campaign. You know, we don't but when we think about the power of the network and the conversations that are intentionally and organically happening across the country, how they are bubbling up, and sometimes an idea is just right for the time. And so I just say that because it's also interesting, the fastest growing area of support is with men. So I think it's fitting. I've got two of the good guys who are going to come up in a second. But it's been an incredible experience to be learning and working with you all over the years. So I'm going to get ready to go into learning mode myself. And you know, I just wanted to sort of read this quote from James Baldwin, which one of my favorite artists. But those who say it can't be done are usually interrupted by others doing it. You all are doing it. We are doing it. The Aspen Institute is proud and privileged to partner with you. It is my true pleasure to invite Dan Porterfield, our CEO of the Aspen Institute, to come up and share his remarks. Thank you, Dan.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I'm so excited to be here today. I'd like to begin by thanking Jackie and Mike Bezos for their extraordinary leadership and the great work that's done by the Bezos Family Foundation. As I have traveled this country in my first year in this role and seen Aspen Institute on the ground in community after community and place after place on project after project, the consistent things have been hard work, great ideas, and the Bezos family. Thank you so much for all that you do. I also would like to thank and recognize my wife, Karen Hurling, who's here today. Karen just completed 3 years working with Governor Tom Wolf as the head of the Office of Special Projects, which worked on all sorts of complex human dramas around sexual assault, family violence, low-wage veterans, single parents, and all the kind of work that you're doing here today. And so, Karen, thank you for joining. With us today, too, are leaders from the Packard Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson, the Chambers Family Fund, the Midiar Network, Community Foundation of Sarasota County, and probably so many more. And thank you all for investing your time and your resources in this work, and of course in Ann's visionary team. Thank you, Ann. Thank you to the team. It makes a huge difference to know that we have right here one of the greatest resources in the country for putting power in the hands of children and families to chart the course of their lives. And since founding Ascend 8 years ago, Ann, with her team that includes Marjorie and her colleagues that are so committed to what we're doing, have built a national hub for ideas and collaboration geared towards what? Economic security, promoting educational success, incorporating the latest research on brain development into policy approaches, prioritizing mental, physical well-being for children and for adults, and so much more. These concepts that Ann has helped to popularize by themselves are ideas that are spreading and attracting all sorts of new supporters, as you can see looking around this room. Makes such a difference. I think actually you will be at the Oscars next year. You will be, if we can get it done, you should actually, because they didn't have one this year, you should be the host. And then the Oscars will be given out for the best depiction of the two-gen strategy in a film, the most hopeful comedy, et cetera. So I think one of the things that that's particularly exciting about what Ascend does is it's sort of like, it's good replicating good, because we're building networks that are constantly getting bigger, wider, deeper, because we convene, we talk about the work, we wrestle with the unsolved challenges, as well as taking heart from the proof positive that this approach will make all the difference. And the diversity and range and commitment of all of you today speaks volumes to why this movement is working. It's proof of all that Ann and Ascend have been able to accomplish. And it's just 8 years. We're just 8 years old. Imagine when we were a teenager. Look around. You come from municipal, state, federal offices. You focus on promoting health and well-being of children and families in your communities, but in all different ways. You come from foundations and nonprofit organizations committed to championing humanity and implementing strategies to transform systems to improve society. Your leaders, your researchers, your parents, your teachers, your caregivers, and you have that experience and expertise to know that the two-gen framework is effective, is adaptable, and is scalable. As part of the Ascend Network, all of you embody so well, I would say, the overall purpose of the Aspen Institute as a whole, which I think, just to put it simply, this institute is about creating a free, just, and equitable society. We do that in lots of ways, kind of like the Force in Star Wars. It's everywhere. More than 60 programs in different ways seeking to put power in the hands of communities and to empower people to create the free lives they want to live. Looking ahead, I think you can count on the Aspen Institute to emphasize 4 major integrative themes I hope will attract you to come back to the Institute to take part in the other work we're doing, which is the partnership work of all of our different programs alongside of the Ascend model. For example, one of those themes, excellence and impact in developing, in leadership development and convening of thinkers and doers, and that's what Ascend does so well. So that's an example for all. Second, excellence and impact in developing scalable solutions to social problems. Again, that's what Ascend is all about. Third, in an era of some polarization and perhaps some pessimism about the American project, a relentless commitment to creating an inclusive society that works for all members, which Ascend calls for and embodies. And then fourth, an institute-wide focus you can count on seeing across our work on children, youth, and families, those rising generations that will always be humanity's greatest hope, and which Ascend knows represents the future of our communities and our country. That future is real people with great hopes who have so much to offer. The future of our country is a 30-something single mother in Baltimore, working in the day, going to school at night to provide a better life and a motivating example for her 2 children. That was my mom. The future of our country is a middle school student in Colorado, preparing for a science fair under the watchful eye of his grandfather, while his father works the night shift of a second job. The future of our country is a recently arrived Salvadoran immigrant in Prince George's County Public Schools, who's enrolling their children in the schools while the community networks are mobilizing around the family to help with housing, employment, healthcare, and skills training. Each of these Americans has a greater opportunity to thrive in this country because of the work we are doing here together. The research, the practice, the organizing, the funding, the casework, all of it together. It's all a set of strands that make a great cord pulling our country forward. And the Aspen Institute stands with you together, as Ann said, in meeting families where they dream. Narrative is so important to this, and each of us have lived a life of citizens in our country where we've been around families that step forward and show us what it means to be a hero. I just finished 8 years serving as a college president. So many of the young people that I handed a hard-earned Franklin and Marshall College degree to on graduation day were there, powered by, yes, their own drive, but also by the incredible foundation of family support and community support that made it possible for a first-gen college student to succeed. We actually tripled in just 7 years the percentage of Pell Grant students in our school, and those Pell Grant students outperformed the student body as a whole on things like retention rates, grades, and winning top fellowships. And they would be the first ones to tell you they didn't do it alone. They did it as part of a family, moving forward together. If I just think about some of those actual people that your work helped to make successful, directly perhaps, or more likely indirectly because you help kids who then around help each other. Think about a young man named Donnell who walked with his mom from New Orleans after Katrina to Houston, lived in temporary housing for about 4 years, made their way back to New Orleans. She then prompted him to push to go to a great college. After graduation, he went back home to be with her as she dealt with a very serious illness. Or I think about a young woman named Fatou, who came here at the age of 10 or 11 after waiting to be brought over by her father, who came here, remarried, and started a second family. She then joined that family and saw her father needed some help and taught him what it would mean to go get citizenship, accompanied him through the process so that he could have a secure life in the American mainstream and make sure her little sisters and brothers had a father who wasn't sent somewhere else against his wishes because he didn't have the right legal status. Or I think about a young man named Isaiah from Newark, whose mother had a rough life, and she got herself together and pushed and got him into a school called St. Benedict's, a private school, a Catholic school, that had a great financial aid program. And he went to school with this great place, and she said to herself, why can't every child in Newark have this? And so she became a passionate ed reformer, joining Mayor Cory Booker to call for the opening of new schools to help more kids like her kids, even though her child was taken care of. I don't know that she ever got her high school degree, but she became a powerful leader in the community of Newark because she had what it takes to realize that something that her child had achieved should be shared with all children. There was a young woman I met named Carolina, whose father, who was an immigrant from Colombia, brought here to escape the death squads by her parents, who started their lives over. They got her into a great college. She was living the college life. First year, her father falls over and dies unexpectedly. She goes back home to help her mother. And I thought to myself, honestly, I'm not going to be able to see Carolina again. She's going to have to stay in Miami and take care of her family. That would be the right thing to do. And then one day in June, her mom called me and said, Carolina's coming back. Like, what do you mean? Carolina's not staying here with me. Carolina needs to go back and complete what she started. incredible to have that kind of inspiration in our lives. People that put it together to pull themselves and pull this country forward. And if all those people, like Carolina and Donnell and Isaiah and Fatu and their families, can do what it takes to create great American lives for themselves, surely we can do all that we have the power to do to make sure those stories are spread many times over. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much. Now I'm excited to introduce Mike Bezos to come to the mic. I've had a lot of fun introducing him around the country, and I won't embarrass him today, except to say that when you work with somebody who really has his values and priorities right, really gets what it means to be a person with other people, to be a partner, to be a human being with other human beings, really gets that, it sends off a spirit that excites you and makes you want to do your very best. Follow that example. This is a man who leads by example. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Dan. That was an amazing introduction. Thank you, Ann, as well, for an interview, for joining us today. And it is an honor to be here and to be surrounded by all of you that are committed to supporting the well-being of children and families. Aspen, whose goal is to build a brighter future for families and children, is an excellent example of the Aspen Institute's mission, as already mentioned. It is bringing people together to examine complex issues, to discuss them openly, to identify opportunities, and to work together towards development of solutions. Our goal for this forum is to build a brighter future for children and families, and we can do this if we all work together towards that end and with a common goal. The Bezos Family Foundation and Aspen share a bias for action. Our partnership with Aspen began many years ago. I don't recall, but it's close to your 8 years that Aspen has been around. Because of our shared belief that we must accelerate the work to improve the life outcomes for all children and families. To do this, we must go straight to the source, working with the parents, practitioners, and civic leaders. Those are the best positioned to create sustainable change. Aspen and the Bezos Family Foundation also share a deep respect for the science and early brain development. And we know that sharing the science is in actionable ways with others means that we can maximize the potential of many more children and create a lasting change in their families. We are fortunate that the latest technologies used by neuroscientists, such as the magnetoencephalography machine in combination with, I do deserve extra points for that word, by the way. We call it a MEG for short. But the MEG, in combination with the more traditional fMRIs, add a significant amount of clarity to how early brain development takes place. That saying that you have heard so many times about that a picture is worth 1,000 words, it has never been truer. The growing body of scientific evidence affirms the way forward, showing that although potential is universal, opportunity is not. That's another phrase that we throw around quite often, but it's so true. We need to remember that it is it's with us every day. And society can change that. We can change that. We can, if we want to have children that thrive, we must take the whole family approach. Parents and caregivers need increased access to the science, to health services, economic support, and very importantly, support in strengthening relationships with our children and with the rest of the family. This is a heavy lift, but there are many soldiers in this army, the army of the persistent. In fact, this room is filled with them. One of the ways our foundation decided to act was to create a science delivery system, putting the brain building information directly into the hands of parents and caregivers. About 6 years ago, our foundation launched Room, an initiative to help parents better understand early brain development and to positively influence parenting routines. We knew we needed to put brain building information right into the hands of parents and caregivers to make the most of the time that they already have with their babies. Every Room tool and the related material was designed to be easy to use, adaptable, so community-based organizations can layer their science onto their existing programs. And they have. Our partners now include 170 sites spanning 28 states, as well as 8 countries overseas. To take advantage of the moments busy parents have, we also using the latest technology available. We have an app. It's in English and Spanish, and we also have SMS text version. Messages and tips are also available in physical form. All this available for free. I include this data here to share with you the rapid growth that, and interest that we have seen in early learning over the last few years. It is clear that the need for actionable information is strong. Parents want to know what they can, how they can enhance the positive relationships with their children. Many parents now know that positive brain building changes their children's opportunities and helps them to be part of the solution. This is why there is significant interest and the need for all of us to work together towards that end. And knowing that that there is that need out there makes us that much more enthusiastic about what we are doing. Each of us here today, all of us in this room and those that are joining us remotely, play an important part day in and day out in developing the 2Gen programs. All of us bring unique perspectives and have talents to offer, all of which are important and needed. Over the next 2 days, we will hear powerful stories of success, progress, and resilience. We will hear some of our nation's best ideas from work that is being done at the ground level. We have these ideas that will inform and inspire us in a way to broaden and change the new sense of, with a new sense of urgency. By keeping families at the center of our work, we will create a culture shift that dramatically improves outcomes for children and their families. But this will only happen if we stay the course, if we are persistent and creative in bringing forth what we know that practice and science brings to us, that early experiences matter, that are intricately aligned, and positive health outcome, economic outcome, and educational outcomes. As you reflect on your work and what you will hear over the next 24 hours, I invite you to remain bold and action-oriented. We each have a unique role to play, as well as a collective role. However, a unified approach will bring the greatest results. So let's continue to invest together in helping children and families to reach their full potential. As you return home at the end of this forum, take with you a renewed and strengthened passion for the sense of community. Remain bold and action-oriented. Keep your eyes and ears open for the next Ascend Forum invitation. Come back with stories and data on how your work has impacted thousands of additional parents and families. Also, bring others with you, others that are equally as dedicated to your work, to our work. And let's force Ascend to find a new, even larger venue for us to meet next time. Thank you to all of you for your leadership, for your support, for parents and children. Together, we will transform their lives. And thanks to Ascend for your tireless effort to mobilize and activate leaders and organizations providing vital space for exchange of the expertise that they have and for the challenges that faces and to align our efforts and accelerate this critical work. Thank you and good luck.